I want to build my dream desk lamp. But why? This story begins a few years ago, when I was scrolling through YouTube looking for something to create of my own. I wanted to build something with form and function, not just something that looks pretty. After countless useless ideas, I stumbled on this video, which gave me the inspiration to build my own desk lamp. But it never happened. I kept putting it off, the same as many other projects, mainly because I didn't have any tools. But fast forward to present day. I'm determined to finally make my dream desk lamp. However, I still don't have many tools, and that's going to be a problem. I didn't actually know what it was going to look like, but I did have some inspiration. I knew I wanted it to be made from walnut, and I also wanted it to look luxury. So I looked at some designs I saved months ago, and these three stood out the most. But I didn't want to build somebody else's design, and these weren't exactly what I wanted. It's my dream lamp, so it needs to be my design. I wanted a combination of rich walnut, something abstract, but also clean and minimal looking at the same time. I made one design, then another, and then another, and I just couldn't figure out what I wanted. After hours of designing, I finally got something that looked original. I was happy with the design, but forgot something that I would later regret. I started with this leftover piece of walnut plywood. This whole lamp was going to be made from a 3-inch wide board with a 45-degree bevel on both sides. The piece where the LED goes was an exact copy of the back pillar. Proportions just give me peace for some reason. The plan was to cut a long enough strip of walnut and then individually cut out portions out of that. A total of 3. The back pillar, the ledge, and the LED bar, plus the base, which was going to be made out of something else. But it didn't end up being that straightforward. I cut one bevel, which went smoothly. But then I faced a challenge. Cutting a 3-inch wide board with a circular saw can be dangerous, especially if you cut on a 45-degree angle. So I tried something different. I cut the piece on top of my workbench like a track saw, which seemed to be doing fine, until I finished the cut. And it wasn't straight. It looked kind of normal, but it didn't go according to my plan, so I wanted to give it another shot. Little did I know, this would end up being a blessing. All I wanted to do was cut a straight beveled piece without messing it up, and the solution to this was so simple, but for some reason it never popped up in my head. I went as far as to try and make my own table saw from another circular saw I had, but after spending an hour trying to make that work, it failed miserably. I kept thinking, surely this can't be that hard. And it wasn't, but it never occurred to me that literally all I had to do was go to the other side of my workbench, and the side would be flipped, putting the bigger side of this board on the workbench, and I could cut the second bevel just like I did the first and get a 3-inch board. But before I tried to think of another way to make it work, I realized I had done it right the first time. Kind of. I thought the cut wasn't straight, and it wasn't, but that was a good thing. It gave the pillar a kind of mitered look, bigger at the base and narrow at the top, which I kind of ended up liking. And the angle was so small that it would barely be noticeable to anybody I didn't tell. Anyways, I did get a 3-inch board, but it wasn't long enough to get every piece, so I had to cut another board, 12 inches long for the LED bar. This went straightforward, because the scrap I had for this piece was already 12 inches, so it could easily be cut by this jig. I also should have done this the first time, but I was impatient and didn't want to cut 3 individual boards separately. After this was done, I had to cut the 3.5-inch ledge from the longer board. But before that, I decided to edge band the sides first. This way, I wouldn't have to veneer such a small piece, which can be difficult. And this took a painfully long time. Thankfully this time it came out much cleaner. Usually when I veneer, I use a utility knife and then sand it. But I used a designated veneer cutter this time. I had it before, but it never seemed to work, like the edge banding was too thick. However, this time I realized if you melt the glue from where you want to cut, it gets much thinner and it slices through it no problem. After I finished this, it felt like the hard part was finally over, or so I thought. So I cut the ledge and glued everything up. It was a bit tricky because the pieces were so small, but it still came out fine. You might recall, at the start of this video, I said, I was happy with the design, but forgot something that I would later regret. And now it was time to pay the price. I focused too much on the form and forgot about the function. Meaning, I didn't design any way to route the wire for the LED, and I wasn't about to have a wire hanging around. Most LEDs are designed to get power from the side, which would be very hard to hide, but I was planning on using an LED strip from this LED bar that I don't use anymore. And luckily, when I opened it up, the wires connected in the middle. This saved me big time. After some thought, I decided the best way to hide this wire would be to take it through the ledge and over. So I decided to chisel out a hollow portion so the USB could fit. Now that the wire could go through, I decided to chisel a channel through the top so the wire didn't rise above the surface of the wood. I'm usually not a fan of handheld tools since they're so slow, but you can't deny these get the job done, especially if you don't have a router for something like this. And then I veneered the top and the bottom to cover up the hole and the channel so it would look clean. And now the wire comes straight out of the back and is out of sight. Now that the whole top portion was finished, it was time to cut the base. I didn't have exact dimensions for this. Fortunately, I had an offcut from the bevel I made earlier, which looked like the right size to match the proportion for the top. And it already had a bevel at the front, so I created a bevel on the side using a miter saw and then left the back as is. And now it was time for the final assembly. I decided to use screws to attach the base instead of wood glue, in case I'd ever have to remove it. And it came out pretty good. But time for the actual test. Will the LED actually work? It came out great. Now all I had to do was apply the finish and see how it looked on my desk. Personally, I really liked how this came out. It now sits on my desk providing ambient lighting when I work. A good bonus is that the LED can change colors with a touch or a remote so I can customize it as I please. Let me know how you like this. See you in the next one.